Yeah, welcome everybody back after the lunch. I'm pretty sure you won't be able to fall asleep despite the lunch, because now David will tell us why maintainers don't grow on trees.
Hello. I'm getting a hang of this technology stuff. Okay, thought I'd talk a bit about maintainers, because I've been to a lot of conferences, and there's loads of shared topics on getting new contributors. And hands up if you've helped get new contributors into a project, open source? Help get new contributors in at all? Nobody's helped get new contributors in. Bugs, yeah. Yeah, you introduced bugs, yeah. Okay, so I'll do a quick recap on getting new contributors, because it's generally really easy. Do cool stuff. Tell people you're doing cool stuff, which is more important than doing stuff, because otherwise, how is anyone going to know? And then have a process for them helping you. And then you'll get people coming on board. But what every talk seems to miss is, but then what? But then what? Well, no, but what generally happens is you've got a maintainer. Contributors come, contributors leave, contributors come, contributors leave. And then at some point, and this is the thing you want to avoid, the maintainer leaves. And then bad things happen. When the maintainer leaves, if you've just got this one maintainer and contributors coming and going, is either the project dies, which, if you've been working for 5 years on a project, isn't an ideal solution, it's been a bit of a waste, or you get into a situation where no one has any real authority, people are just waiting for other people to merge things or ignoring anything anybody else has to say, because no one's a maintainer now. Or possibly a worst possible thing that can happen is you have an awkward power struggle and other people want to be a maintainer, but nobody else has blessed them with being a maintainer, and then they go off and fork your project, and it's a bit of argy-bargy, and it's horrible for everybody. So, when should you look for a replacement? If you are a maintainer now, when should you look for somebody to replace you as a new maintainer? Sort of, yeah, because before it gets to this point, certainly before you quit. So when are you going to quit? You don't know. You could get hit by a bus, at which point you could all get hit by a bus on tomorrow's day trip. Hopefully not, that would be very awkward. But you don't know when you're going to quit, right? And it's not just that, you could have a career change, and suddenly you find yourself with no time. Suddenly, so no time in your project, because different jobs have different things outside that. You could have a life change. For example, having a child. But the point is, you don't know. So your right time to look for a replacement is when you're not looking for one, which is quite awkward. If you only take one thing away from this talk, it's this. The right time to look for a replacement is when you don't want a replacement because you're happy. Because if you find yourself finding you don't have enough time, you're not going to have time to train a replacement. If you're finding you don't have any passion for your project, you're not going to be able to pass on any passion in training a maintainer. So you want to be doing this, as Jos shouted out yesterday. I mean, the right time to plant a tree is 10 years ago. Apparently it's not. Apparently it's in October because of the patterns. But yesterday. So what are other benefits of training maintainers up? Burnout avoidance. Pretend this is 2 slides. Burnout avoidance. If you're the only person doing a project, it can be overwhelming. And the reason it's overwhelming, the reason people get burnt out, is if you're a maintainer, there's lots of things you feel like you should be doing. And burnout is when you feel like you should be doing lots of stuff, and you don't have any of the time for the things you actually want to be doing. And you're just overwhelmed with things you think you should be doing. If you have other people who you're training as maintainers, you can share this load. And Linus Torvalds, one of the most famous maintainers in the world, he took a year from doing a kernel because he was burnt out. But because he had range of other maintainers and sub-maintainers, he could do it. And then he could come back and be king again. But it really helps. It also helps keeps developers engaged. You wouldn't stay at a company if you felt like you had no career path, if you were just going to be at the bottom rung of the ladder forever. But if you can help other people feel like climbing a career ladder in open source, of becoming a maintainer or maintainer of part of a project, they'll stick around for longer. And it makes sense. And it keeps the ecosystem alive. There's a graph, multimedia. And this is a graph of citing some stats from other people on the internet, so it's probably real. Nearly half the maintainers in open source have been maintainers for over 10 years. And there's a lot of really old people here with grey beards. And people are getting older, so it's our job to make sure we're bringing in younger people and helping young people rise up through the ranks of becoming a maintainer as well. So how do you turn devs into maintainers? The most important part is spotting potential candidates. Because there are people who just drive by and then leave. So if you can focus your time, you don't waste as much time. So what makes a good maintainer? Bit of programming, definitely helps. Understanding UI, you don't have to be the best UI person in the world, but if you have no knowledge of anything, you're going to struggle. UX, you have to do a bit of promo, or at least talk to the right people, have an understanding. You need to be good at communication. It's probably one of the most important skills, because if you've got an idea but can't articulate your idea, you're going to struggle. If you don't like a merge request but can't articulate why you don't like a merge request, you're going to struggle. Probably one of the most important things. Commitment, that's something that's very important. Being able to keep working on a project day after day. And having a vision. Ideally sharing the same vision as your own, if you're trying to train another maintainer up. But having some sense of vision of where I want to take your project. But not everyone is set to be a maintainer. There are people who just like to code. And if you just like to code, you're not going to be a good maintainer. And some people just want to do new things. They'll do a bit of new things, work on one project, and they're going to jump to another project and go to another project. That isn't to say they're bad people. They're a brilliant asset to whichever community you're in, but they're not necessarily set out to be a maintainer or something. So you really want to focus your efforts down on finding the right people. So here's who to spot and hone in on and start to attack. So somebody who makes lots of commits in the same topic. So if I'm in color paint, if somebody made 20 commits to a toolbox on your left-hand side, I'd be like, OK, cool, this guy could be a maintainer. Or if somebody made commits to all of the header bars in all of the different applets, different bits of code, but the same theme, that's someone who's got a sense that it might be a good maintainer. Someone who just makes lots of commits randomly or spread all over the place, probably not going to be a good maintainer. You want somebody who accepts feedback positively. You can have a good interaction with on GitLab, because you don't want to maintain it you can't work with. You're not going to help train him up. And importantly, somebody who partakes in the other tasks, reviews, Bugzilla. Because you don't become a maintainer by just committing code. It seems a trope that the more code you do, now I'm a maintainer. But that's only shown that you can code. Being a maintainer is mostly about doing reviews. So if you want to become a maintainer of a project, stop just submitting patches. Make sure you get involved in these other topics. I remember when I became a Qt approver, I said, oh, but I've got lots of patches before this. And then a guy came to me and said, well, sure, but that just shows you can code. That doesn't prove anything about being a good approver. So it was when I was doing other tasks that he was like, OK, actually, yeah, well, you can be an approver now. And one of the important parts, you want somebody who gets satisfaction in the product being better, not just in doing the writing code. And you can spot this if you come up with a merge request and then between you come up with a new idea on how to solve a product problem better. If they take that on board and then try and solve a problem a different way, that's a really good candidate. Somebody who goes, well, I've coded this now. I don't care. I enjoyed writing a code. They're probably not going to be a good maintainer. So what sort of actionable items can you do as a maintainer now to help other people become future maintainers. Sort of the crux of all of this. Ask people to do things. So reviews is a really good place to start. A sentence I use quite often is, hey, Bob, can you look at this merge request? You've done a lot of work in that area. Because something that tends to happen is people are shy. People don't feel confident in reviewing other code. They just wait for your maintainer to do it, which isn't ideal. If you're a maintainer, you want to reduce your workload. So getting other people to do it is good. And by default, if other people who do talk on GitLab and get engaged tend to be the most self-confident people, and the most self-confident people are not always the best people. So you want to reach out to your shy people who are doing a good job and say, well, actually, can you step up and be taking on these extra roles? And it doesn't hurt to ask, because the worst that can happen is they ignore you. And then the next step on from that is once you've got people doing reviews and commenting, is if they do a thing of just typing, looks good to me, but don't press the approve button, right, you could go back and press the approve button, sure. Or you could go back to that person and say, actually, you know, if you're happy with it, approve it yourself. And then best thing about this, it saves work for you. So ask people to do things. Another thing that's really important to do is make sure you explain the rationale behind processes. Like if you've got a feature freeze or something, explain, oh, this is the history of why we have a feature freeze. And make sure they understand these things so they don't fall into the same mistakes that you've already made. Pass any lessons that you've got onto your future generations. And then you can go and retire, hopefully. This is my plan. And then, most importantly, empower people. Trust them to make decisions. And you can still be an influence. You don't have to give up control of a project completely. But if a sort of patch comes along and I don't necessarily like it, but I don't care that much, I can say, well, I think this is a bad idea, but I know this other person's been maintaining this feature more than me, or say a toolbox in color paint. If somebody else comes up with an idea for a new button, I would say, okay, I don't like it, but I haven't really been maintaining this part. I'll let this other person have a say. And that helps the other person blah, 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 helps the other person feel valued and validated. And if the other person feels valued and validated, they'll stay in the project and pick up skills. It also helps them learn to make their own mistakes, which they'll grow from and become a better maintainer. So how can you do this? Provide official roles. I like people being sub-maintainer of this particular part, or having a co-maintainer. My very first project where I was a maintainer, I was lucky enough that I had this other guy with me, Martin Klapatek, if anyone remembers him. And we would always refer to each other as co-maintainers of KD Telepathy. The project died, but it wasn't really our fault. We still had a really good, maintainership, good friendship. And whilst the project was going well, I think it was one of the best products to work on, from my point of view, because I had a buddy I could rely on if I needed to. So have co-maintainers in your projects. Have sub-maintainers. Have more maintainers. Don't just be one person. And encourage them to meetings. Again, people are shy. If you know there's a sprint happening, but they've done a couple of commits, they're not necessarily going to come along unless you explicitly reach out to them personally in a back channel and say, Bob, do you want to come along to this meeting? Or have you seen this link to this meeting? And tell people, actually, you should come along. And that includes Academy, of course. So how do you help people feel ownership? Well, make sure you refer to them by a role. Refer to people as, oh, he's a co-maintainer of this. This person's a maintainer of this particular backend. So use that. If you've got an attributes page, like a credits, make sure you put them in there. One of the most important things, blogging. A lot of people hate blogging. I hate blogging. But when I actually do it, and I get your feedback from your community, it's very uplifting. I mean, unless you're Excelli. And no, but forcing people to blog is really good, and because then they'll get that feedback, and then they'll be encouraged by it, hopefully. Yeah, no, in general, your blogs get positive comments, though. Right? Don't know what that slide's about. In all seriousness, I did nag other people to submit Academy talks, because that's part of it. So summary, find a replacement early, like actively all the time, look out for new replacements. Trust people early, like before you think they're necessarily ready for it, start trusting them. Because, or at least pretending to, you can still keep an eye on them in the back, on the sneaky side, but start trusting people and empower them. But most importantly, learn to let go of your projects and give some space. Because if you don't give space for people to grow, they can't. So if you stay on being, I'm a maintainer, they're not going to grow. And then you're not going to have time to grow yourself into other projects. Oh, and most importantly, watch out for buses. I am way too early.
Thank you, David. Now we have, again, lots of time for questions. So who has a question?
I wanted to reduce time for questions.
So you spend an awful lot of time talking about maintainers, given that last year at Academy I was arguing that we in KDE don't really have traditional maintainers in a lot of sense. Do you think our current model of very informal and distributed maintainership is serving us well, or do we want to make some changes there?
I think we do have, I mean, everyone knows who your maintainers are. Like, if I say who's the maintainers of Quinn, you're going to name the two people, right?
Quinn is sort of the exception here. I would argue that Quinn is sort of the exception here, but if you asked who's the maintainer of Plasma Desktop,
I think I would still give you 4 or 5 names, or certainly maintainers of different parts. If I said who's the maintainer of Clipper, Fusion, right? And we have people who are de facto maintainers of things, and people wait for them to do things. And you're right, we don't necessarily name them very well. K-about data does, so we used to have it. We used to have this very clear distinction. You're right, it is vague. Maybe being more opaque about it would actually help, because then you get to tell people, oh, you're a maintainer now, because then you've got that career progression ladder. And that's quite good. I mean, Qt does it. Lots of other projects have it. So yeah, actually providing a more explicit ladder might make things better than being so vague that people don't feel like they should be.
So, I mean, he basically kind of prefaced this question for me, but basically, like, as someone who's recently come into the KD space, you know, occasionally drops in some code here and there, but most of the time spends its time poking people. The biggest challenge I have is finding who I'm supposed to actually talk to about stuff. And this is, you know, to make it more concrete. When something weird or strange behavior is going on in, for example, a KDE framework, or there's something that's not right, it is very difficult to find someone to ask and get in touch with to figure it out. Like, I don't know, it was just a couple weeks ago, we were talking about K-Wallet, and we spent, like, I don't know, 2 hours in the Plasma Development Matrix room all trying to work our way backwards to how the heck K-Wallet works and what we're supposed to do to make it work properly or whatever. And it's because there's it feels like the informal maintainership, distributed maintainership model has also had the side effect of your thing about buses. I can't remember the word, but like you're really hyper-focused on buses. Seems to speak to some kind of thing about buses happening to you in your life. But more seriously, right, it feels like all the formal people are just kind of, all the formal people who'd have knowledge just kind of up and go in a poof of smoke, and then we don't really have anything because without knowing who those people are, there is no mechanism in which to, you know, figure out how to pass that on or that sort of thing. So, like, your presentation is great, and I actually do a lot of this stuff in my Fedora context, and it makes a lot of sense, but I feel like right now, I don't think we're set up well in KDE to apply that particular
Yeah, I mean,
experience?
I mean, I did this talk because I think there's a lack of people being maintainers.
Yeah.
Because people have just left and then left a void. Right?
Yeah.
And I saw a problem, and then I'm retroactively saying, this is how we should have fixed it.
Yeah.
I'm aware of that. I agree with that. And the solution there is to get more people to feel like they're maintainers.
Right.
And make sure
Microphone.
No. Yeah, it's coming, it's coming.
Thank you. Sorry, I spoke for my turn. I wanted to ask, like, if there's any transparency when a component is unmaintained, because that seems an even bigger problem than not being able to find the maintainer.
Yeah, so we've got metadata files with names of people who used to do things, and that's also a problem, right? If you don't pass things on, we don't have that passing on, so we just have people being named as maintainers who aren't necessarily the most active. So we've got a lot of legacy, and legacy can be good, legacy can be bad. So we need to make sure our legacy stuff, it has an officially defined maintainer. I think it's better to choose somebody than let it go. I mean, Krunner is a good example. Krunner, people did some work, it went away. Somebody came in doing some work, and I'm not sure if he's here. We're like, oh, this person's not doing, I don't know if we should trust this person to be doing big changes. And then we did, and then it paid off, and this guy did a load of really good changes. So, and then became a maintainer because of that. So it's a problem, we need to address it, we need more maintainers.
Maybe a blog, like in the app blogs,
Yeah?
saying like, hey, these apps are unmaintained.
Well, I mean, I did.
Should I repeat everything you said? Because we have a stream and a microphone, and people are just not following it. I didn't really hear it either. Since I have the microphone anyway, I think the role of maintainer, co-maintainer, that's kind of a little clear if you know to find the right people. But you were also talking about approvers, and I think that's pretty much everybody who is who dares touching the approval button.
Right, exactly. The word dares, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of people don't feel it can.
Yeah.
And actually, a good pattern to do if you're someone who is happy with a commit, but you want to, if you're not confident, say, it looks good to me. If nobody else says anything in 24 hours, merge it. And that's something I do if I'm not confident on some project that I'm reviewing on. And that's a good pattern.
Yeah. I was wondering if you were arguing that we may need kind of more officially assigned roles, because it's we made a very conscious decision, especially when we moved from SVN to Git like a million years ago, that we want this really flat structure that basically everybody is allowed to push code somewhere, and I think basically we still have that. And I don't know of any occurrences that this was ever really a problem. But I was wondering, do you want some more formal process in there?
I don't want to take things away. That's definitely not something I want to do. Because I mean, in Qt, for example, you have maintainers and you have approvers. Right? It's not necessarily, you don't have to bunch those two things together. So we can have anyone can approve. I think we still kind of have each group of people make decisions, each group of people set a vision for your project. Yeah. Because it's such an implicit role, people do implicitly have maintainers, and we certainly sort of have explicit maintainers. Every framework says a maintainer next to it. So we're in a bit of a limbo. I agree we're in a bit of a limbo. Which way we go, I don't know, but getting out of a limbo, I think, is important.
And I think without passing judgment here, there's absolutely nothing wrong with questioning these things once in a while. If it works well, then let's continue doing it. But I don't know if it works for, we're a very large project, and some things are more critical than others, and I think generally it works pretty well, but it's okay to question these things once in a while. Are we happy even with these fundamental community principles?
I do like the thing we have where everybody who feel that they can approve things from a technical perspective, they have the permissions to do it. And it is not hard to go into a new area. What I do think we are missing from the maintainer role is the in some projects is the vision and the communication part of it, and also the a bit tedious task of reviewing the bigger things that nobody else picks up. That there was just, for example, yesterday somebody said in a channel, I made this merge request to a framework 2 months ago that did a major refactoring. Anybody wants to review it? And yeah, that is a thing we're missing. People feeling responsible for all of the stale stuff in GitLab.
Sebas, just so you know, there's also a hand at your back.
Oh, sorry.
I've got an online question.
Okay.
How can we give credit to reviewers, i.e. maintainers, and bug fixers have change logs, blogs? Can reviewers get some of it too for motivation through recognition?
And it's a good question. Some projects, we've got a scattered approach. Some projects do have, if you press help and about, you get a little list of names. And I think it's quite nice to sort of see a list of names. Like, not in your face when you open the app, like a movie at the end with the credits, but somewhere where you can access it. Like, I had a job interview once where I ran KDE, and you're like, oh, what stuff have you done? And I sort of leaned over, like, well, here's my name here. You know, it's quite nice. So yes, putting contribution listings in some sort of hidden away place that you can surface is good. We have that. I think we could do a better job of updating it all the time. But that's something we should be doing as maintainers, is updating it, and updating it with new maintainers. For frameworks, it's on the API documentation, which seems like a good place because that's where your user is. Your user's looking at your documentation, hopefully. And that seems a good place for it. So we do have something. And it's up to all of us to keep it up to date. Sebastian?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I think having these little unclear or informal structures can also form a barrier to for new contributors, because I'm a new Ocular developer, as basically some drive-by feature. So I wrote it, I pushed a merge request, and I don't know who can approve that. Is anybody even interested still in this code? The directions I was getting from, for example, from this guy was very friendly to be the first reviewer. Made sense to me, but my last status was probably Albert is the one who needs to tell me if it has to go left or right. And to me, that wasn't really clear. And in the end, I got some, if you move this and that class over there, it'll be fine, but the actual feature still wasn't really reviewed, I think. So after 2 weeks, I was like, if nobody complains, next week I'm just going to push this to master, and I did. And
and I think something we need to work on, because more time spent in reviews saves time later. So having more people trying to get involved in that process is important. Nicholas had a question at the back. I just want to make you run. Faster, faster, faster. He's not running.
I don't know if I missed it or if you didn't mention it, but there was a slide about future maintainers being good at taking feedback.
Yep.
But I think I don't know if you mentioned this. Maybe I missed it. It's also giving feedback, right? Like, we don't want the grumpy maintainer. But then the question is, what if that is the only one left? Like if it's just me and the grumpy guy.
I mean, in that case, try and get some more contributors, right? So you don't have to go to your grumpy guy. Teaching a grumpy guy is also good. Yeah, well, that's a very difficult challenge. I mean, set by example. Tell them, I think you could have approached this a different way. That's also a good thing to say. Like, your sentiment was fine in criticizing this patch. However, don't use the word fuckwit so many times. That sort of thing. You can pass this feedback on, and in all seriousness, right, you can pass that feedback on saying, actually, you could have handled that situation better. And hopefully that will help. Especially if you say why, right? If you say, this is the reason you can't say that, is because then they won't listen to your feedback, or then they just get focused on your words rather than the sentiment you're actually trying to convey. If you didn't do that, they would have focused on this, and it might have gone easier for you. So, yeah.
I just wanted to point out that at least for frameworks, not too long ago, we made a very conscious decision to remove all of the maintainer metadata from the frameworks, because most of it was outdated anyway and listed people that I have never met in my time in KDE, which are obviously not maintaining the thing they were supposed to maintain. And I still think that was the right call, but...
And there's a difference between hiding it and still having a maintainer, right? So, I mean, if you look at Kirigami, you can name a few names of who are the probable maintainers. And there are things which nobody cares about anymore, like KTelnet or something. Sure, it doesn't have a maintainer because it doesn't been touched.
There's also stuff like Kcompletion, which is there, it works. It doesn't have a natural maintainer. Somebody touches it from time to time. It's there, it works.
Well, I mean,
it's not like KTelnet.
Yeah, at which point it falls back to who's sort of a maintainer of frameworks in general, Nicholas?
Who would that be? You mean David 4?
Nope. Nicholas? Some fellow, anyway.
I was going to I was going to mention as well, as far as you know, sometimes you have those situations where there's only one person, and sometimes that person is not as collaborative as you would expect. I just want to mention that in those cases, you can work with the community working group to resolve some of these issues. Of course, these are not necessarily, you know, as complex as other situations we have with people, but we've had situations in the past where maintainers became more of a blocker type attitude rather than somebody who was engaging with people who were submitting to their projects, their maintained projects. And I think we always have to remember that at the end of the day, the projects belong to KDE. And we accept maintainership, but everyone is encouraged by, as per our guidelines, to engage with whoever wants to work with you. And that we have to engage in good nature. If that doesn't happen, then let us know and we can try to resolve the situation, because at the end of the day, that's affecting code, it's stifling innovation, it's, you know, definitely not, it's irritating at the end of the day too. And we just don't see progress in some applications. And that's not what we're looking to do, right? As a community, we want to push things forward. So just putting a plug there for the community working group. So if these situations happen, let us know and explain what's going on and we can help you.
This is earlier someone mentioned about how it is occasionally difficult to find out who to contact, which is a reality of dealing with people who are not necessarily deeply involved in the community already, and even people who are don't necessarily know who to go and poke. And so having that information directly available somewhere is useful. It doesn't have to be a strict maintainer, but closer? Okay. But yeah, it doesn't have to be a strict maintainer, but someone who can function as a contact point and who can then distribute the information to people who need it. That is, like, it feels like a useful middle point between someone who is a maintainer and someone who, yeah, I guess what I'm suggesting is a community manager, basically. Someone who knows who to poke. I guess. Which we kind of have, but it isn't exposed anywhere. Yeah. So a suggestion rather than a question, but we can formulate it as a question. Does it seem like a good idea?
Yeah, because that's how FAQs work, yeah. You've got somebody behind you. Close.
Not sure if you'd have the answer to this, but how to prevent malicious maintainers like Jia Tang?
Oh, malicious maintainers. Things just got spicy. I mean, obviously, you can still look through all of your merge requests that are happening, and there's no magic solution if somebody is a decoy for 2 years and then pivots. I mean, there's nothing you can do. But I think don't have to worry too much about it because you've still got a huge community. Well, certainly within KDE, we've got a huge community of other people who are all watching everything that happens everywhere. So relying on that a bit, obviously being somewhat vigilant for these malicious people, but I wouldn't get too worried about it in niche components. Maybe if I maintained an SSL backend or something, sure, you need to care a bit more. But if it's in color paint, what are you going to do? Right? If there's anything truly malicious, hopefully it'll be spotted in review by somebody from the fact we've got this wider community. Wrap it up.
Yeah, thank you, David.